All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today I'll be discussing Cormani McClain potentially heading to Colorado to join Deion Sanders and play opposite side of Travis Hunter. It would give Colorado a phenomenal secondary duo to get things started in Sanders' first year there in Boulder. If you're not caught up to speed on who Cormani McClain is, 9th-ranked prospect, according to 24/7 Sports, top-ranked quarterback, 3rd-ranked prospect in the state of Florida, 6'2", 165 pounds from Lakeland. Some of the positives that really stand out about McClain: some great raw athleticism, elite ball skills, looks for contact, some of that top-notch burst. He's really good at closing gaps. This is a guy that started his career at wide receiver, and then he eventually made that transition over the defense, and he's thrived in that role as well. So he certainly carries those ball skills over as well. I believe those 19 interceptions he had over a 2-year span in high school. So that's certainly some great numbers I like to see. A guy that can really pluck the ball out of the air. McClain, though, all around is a very fantastic prospect. Some of the negatives, though, got a bit of a slender frame. It's pretty evident being 165 pounds. And, of course, he's still very young. So that's certainly, a more muscular build is going to come with some more time in college where he has more time to focus on building up his physique. Technique and footwork, pretty basic when it comes to these guys coming out of high school, regardless of position, corner, wide receiver, offensive line, quarterback. All these guys seem to have less than stellar footwork, so that's certainly not really much of a big deal. I think going to potentially play with Deion Sanders, that's certainly something that's going to get coached up. He's probably going to be one of the better cornerback coaches. I don't know who else you could learn from that's any better, really, than Primetime himself. And then some of his mental makeup needs some growing. Obviously, this entire recruitment is a bit of a drama-filled process, but I think on the field as well, a lot of scouting reports have indicated that he doesn't move on from mistakes very well. Again, that's another thing you can really learn from being young. You'll eventually get over that, especially playing with Deion Sanders. He's a great mentor, a great leader, so that's something that's not too worried about either. So some of his negatives there, obviously every recruit and prospect has them, despite how highly ranked they may be, but nothing really to worry about too much when it comes to McClain overall. Again, a great raw athlete that's going to continue to get better with more development. Looking at the latest intel on his recruitment, he committed to Miami on October 27th, did not sign during the early period. Was very uncommittal recently. I believe it was the All-American game. They were asking him if he was going to stay with Miami, and he didn't seem to gesture many positive things towards remaining with the Hurricanes. The Lakeland, Florida native was considered to be a Florida lock. Kind of shocked people when he went to Cristobal's crew instead. Miami, though, they're still going to pull in a top 5 class here regardless. I know Mario Cristobal's done a great job with his class. They have the top... he's got 2 of the top 3 tackles in this upcoming class, though. Big commitment to the offensive line this offseason. They've also had some big-time additions in the transfer portal. Matthew Lee from UCF, he's kind of leading the way there. And they also picked up one from Alabama. There's also a handful of guys on the defensive side of the ball. A big-time commitment to the offensive line and, the defensive side, mainly the front 7 for Miami. So I think Cristobal, obviously one of the best recruiters in the country. He's going to continue to put things together. And I think one thing to monitor with Miami is Jaheim Singletary. Is he potentially on his way to the U? Obviously, the former 5-star from Riverside in Jacksonville. He played this past season at Georgia, didn't see the field much. You rarely do, especially at a school like Georgia, regardless of being a 5-star. And he opted to transfer, and it looks like Miami, they're going to be the top candidates looking for his services, a 5-star guy. And I think that's big because if they're going to land another 5-star, and they're going to let McClain walk, they're not going to make much of an effort here right before National Signing Day to try and retain him. So I think this could really work out for Miami quite well. You lose one 5-star, but you end up getting another one in Singletary, a guy that's already been in college for a year and picked up some great knowledge, I think, up in Athens, part of a national title-winning team. So I certainly think that this could really work out for Miami and Cristobal. I think they might just let him walk here. McClain, he did take a recent visit to Colorado this past weekend. It was kind of a quiet visit, I think. Not a lot of people knew about it until he was posting all over social media. That's when it became kind of common knowledge that he was in Boulder this past weekend. It's been a really drama-filled recruitment over these past few weeks, especially mainly since Deion Sanders took over at Colorado. Obviously, they have 20-plus commits in the transfer portal. They've also already picked up some highly notable recruits from the high school ranks as well. So Deion Sanders, everyone knew when he landed a Power 5 job, he was going to do some work when it comes to recruiting. That's why everybody wanted him. Well, I wouldn't say everybody, but I think he was such a hot topic because obviously the coaching experience is not really there with Deion. Only been a coach for a couple of years. But everyone knew the benefits of having him. The boosters were going to be excited because of his ability to pull in these talents, and Colorado ended up landing him. Alabama also made a late push here, I think, for McClain. But I think some of the drama has kind of pushed them away. Nick Saban and his team. I think they have the second best recruiting class of all time, right after Texas A&M, who had it last year. I'm not sure if they've, in terms of points, jumped over the Aggies quite yet. But they've pulled in a numerous amount of 5 stars, a great class for the Tide all around. So they're looking to add one more guy. But it looks like they're going to be out of the running here, especially with Pete Golding departing for Ole Miss. I'm not sure how highly recruited McClain was by Pete Golding, but if I had to guess, he was probably pretty impactful in his potential sighting in Tuscaloosa. Just overall, those are kind of the big bulletin points, though. I think, what will Travis Hunter, Cormani McClain secondary do to college football? That'd be 2 number 1 corners in a row that Deion Sanders would have landed. I mean, this is just absurd what Deion Sanders was able to do, because we all knew he's going to have a big impact in recruiting, but for him to come and land the top 2 corners, regardless of his school, because Travis Hunter, he had an opportunity to go elsewhere, because I assumed when he went to Jackson State, he'd probably play there for a year or 2, and then when Deion left, he'd potentially, of course, follow him, which he did, or he'd go to a high-end Power 5 school like a Georgia or USC to potentially make more money and set himself up better for the pros, and also have an opportunity to play for a national championship, because Colorado, obviously, they're not going to do that right off the bat. One thing that's going to be for certain, though, is I think Travis Hunter will probably play more on the defensive side of the ball heading to the Power 5 ranks. Most guys that play 2 positions typically don't really make it that far, it seems, in college. I know Miles Jack gave that a shot. He ended up in the pros, but or Dory Jackson as well. But towards the back end of their tenure in college, they focused more so on the defensive side of the ball, and it paid off for them as they landed in the pros, and they're both still there today. So I think that's one thing that's certainly going to happen is Travis Hunter will be more committed to the defensive side of the ball. He's a heck of a pass catcher, though. I remember watching him in that game a few weeks ago. Man, he really saved the day for them. Very impressive player to watch. And McClain, of course, has the similar skills. So potentially they could get him involved on offense. I don't know if that's best for the future of those 2 prospects. But, these 2 corners, it's obviously they're going to play day 1. Colorado, I mean, this is a team that really struggled on defense last year. I believe they had 185 missed tackles as a team. That's certainly a big focal point. They allowed, I think, 45 points per game. It was one of the worst marks in college football. So obviously there's a lot of work to do, mainly from just a fundamental standpoint, and landing 2 5 stars would certainly help in doing that. But I think this would certainly put college football on notice, and that's why I felt like Deion Sanders potentially going to Georgia Tech would have been very massive for the SEC, because North Georgia, he's obviously very familiar with that area, and you're recruiting against Kirby Smart, Alabama. Those guys, they love to try and get talent from that area. So I really felt like if he went to Georgia Tech, he would have probably been able to pull in more recruits, and especially now seeing what he's doing in Colorado. Boulder is a very beautiful town, but I think Georgia Tech would have been a little bit more desirable for some of these recruits. But it certainly doesn't matter. But it would have been fun to watch, because he's already out-recruiting them right now for these top corners. And if he would have ended up at Georgia Tech, it would have been fun to watch him try to out-recruit Smart, Saban, those guys up in North Georgia. But regardless, overall, again, a very drama-filled recruitment for Cormani McClain. Jaheim Singletary seems on his way to potentially be on the U. That'd be, pretty good. That'd be a pretty good way for things to work out for Cristobal. I can't be too upset with that if that happens, but I'm certainly sure they're not very happy. I believe they went to go meet with McClain this past weekend, and he was in Boulder, so that's certainly something they're not very pleased with, I'm sure. It's going to give Colorado this phenomenal cornerback secondary. Should be fun to see how they do in the Pac-12 this year. If that ends up being official, which I do anticipate it will, as he plans on making his commitment, I believe, on Sunday, and that's pretty much going to wrap things up for very drama-filled recruitment. So that's going to be it for today's episode, guys. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.